Running one project well takes attention to detail and hard work. You apply that same strategy to trying to run 5 projects in parallel, your life will become a misery. In fact, a study found that you'll lose around 75% of your time context switching between different projects. The solution to managing multiple projects at once isn't working harder or managing your time better, it's using a completely different strategy. In this video, I'm going to show you the exact system to managing multiple construction projects at once that you can use. And fundamentally, this is the difference between project management and program management that resources like the PMBOK, the project management body of knowledge, talk about. Good project management is a function of effort, attention to detail, and fundamentally hours worked. Portfolio and program management is a function of systems, judgment, and strategy. So the first question to ask is, are you managing multiple projects yourself, or do you have a team to manage them for you and you're sitting above the team? Now, obviously, if you're trying to do all of this yourself, you're going to get capped on your actual capacity and bandwidth to manage multiple projects. But if you do have a team, then the ceiling lifts on how much any one person can do. And the processes and strategies I'm going to talk about in this video are much more focused on what you can set up a team to do. So step number 1 of this framework is going to be how you actually set up an individual project to run without you. So the purpose of this first step is to give each individual project the best possible chance of running successfully and autonomously. This is all going to be about building processes and allocating responsibility for those processes. So I would say there's 4 angles you want to look at this from when you're talking about the processes behind delivering a project successfully. So number 1 is going to be the actual on-site delivery and coordination. So basically getting the right people, materials, and information to the right people at the right time so they can actually do the work. Then we have more broadly our project management functions. So these are things like our cost, our schedule, our quality, and the systems and processes behind those. Then we have our contract management and contract administration processes, which is really making sure we're doing what is specified in the head contract and then administrating our subcontracts and our procurement properly. So we're not paying our subcontractors more than what we should, and we're getting value for money on all our procurement. And then we've got our document control. So this is just things like having a really good project folder, a good filing system, and having basically systems in place for every bit of new information, what you do with it, how you track it, how you store it. So everything you need to know and all the correct revisions of information is easy to access. Now, within these 4 domains, delivery and coordination, project management, contracts, and document control, every process has more or less 2 modes. You've got the business as usual tasks. So these are the recurring, ongoing tasks that happen on a set frequency. So making your monthly payment claim or a weekly project report that you send to your client to show them what's happening. Then you have your event-driven tasks. For example, what happens when something new happens? For example, you receive a new RFI from your client, you get a new revision of the drawings that has a document control process that kicks off. It has a change management and contract management process for preparing the variation associated with it. So very important to basically understand the core groups of processes, and then basically the 2 modes within the processes, which is the business as usual task and the change management task. So the goal would be to take every workflow you have and then to map it out into a series of steps. For example, this is a project controls and scheduling workflow that I've broken down into 3 categories. We've got establishing the trackable baseline and setting up your rule of credit system, the actual control group, so the weekly and monthly checks, and then you've got some sort of closeout process. And within here, we've got checks that happen when we deviate from our planned value, when we're going off track. What do we actually do about it? So basically, we're taking this process, we're breaking it down into discrete steps, and we're defining exactly what has to happen in each step. What we're trying to do is give repeatable structure to a construction project. Then once we have this structure set up, we basically want to allocate responsibility to do the task. And we want to do this in a hierarchy. So number 1 would be, what can we get software or a tool to do? This is obviously going to be the most scalable thing. For example, can we have an estimating or cost control software that takes our original construction estimate and then maps this out to our predefined budget cost codes? If we can set up a software that does this, this is obviously going to be the most effective way to do it. As an extension of software with artificial intelligence and tools like that now, we can get AI and automations to do some of these tasks. Or another example of this would be using a software like Mastt that auto generates all of our project reporting and our project dashboard. So there's no actual work that goes into us. Once we set up our cost codes, our schedule, our risk, all of this happens automatically. So again, that is a great way to do things. If we can get software or an automation to do it for us, again, perfect. We've actually taken work off our plates and we know it'll happen the same way every time. Now, obviously there's huge limitations in what software and even AI can do. So the next level above this, I would be to say, can you actually outsource some of these process to lower cost countries like the Philippines using services like Upwork? For example, preparing your monthly payment claims. If that is simply a process of looking at your percent complete for each of your activities and matching them up to your schedule of values, is that something you can outsource to overseas or some sort of virtual assistant? Then the third layer above this would be what's left, which is where you need a physical on-site construction team, which is obviously going to be the most expensive thing, but it is going to be important for things like liaising with subcontractors, dealing with day-to-day issues. Those are the leftover tasks that you make the responsibility of your construction team. So the goal here is what we've done is we've taken every process and we have allocated somebody or something. So we know that task is going to be covered by some automation, some software, or a person who is responsible for doing it. We're basically turning our construction project into this repeatable set of workflows. So what this means is basically your team is doing the day-to-day tasks. So where do you fit into all this? You need to set up a reporting and escalation process so you can be both aware of what's happening and your team knows when they need to engage you. The reason this is important to define properly is from the reporting perspective is you can carefully keep track of what is actually happening. For example, on this project, which is done in a Mastt project dashboard, you can clearly see exactly where there is variance to budget, what cost codes we have issues with, whether the project is being delayed in certain areas. As a manager, you don't have to dive into messy and complicated spreadsheets to do this. You've got all the information you need right there available at your fingertips. The other important part of this is the actual escalation process. So for example, if your team knows without your approval, they can spend $2,000 or $5,000, then you're giving them the freedom to make their own decisions. And again, you're just going to be pulled less and less into the everyday. If for every minor purchase you have to approve it, obviously that is going to generate an admin burden for you where you're going to have to do everything. But there are certain things you would obviously always want to be escalated to for about, so for example, like safety concerns, maybe big risks, big commercial decisions, issues with the client, those topics should automatically be escalated. So really the reporting and the escalation is a bit of a 1-2 combination. Reporting lets you at a regular cadence or frequency gain insights as to what's happening in the project and keep up to date. The escalation makes sure when big issues happen, your team is automatically pulling you in. Now, once you've set up your projects to basically, as much as possible, run autonomously without you by building really good systems, then you set up a way of reporting and escalating. The next step is what is your job across the portfolio or program of things? Well, it's pretty simple. You have to keep on top of the key metrics for any project. So again, cost, schedule, safety, risk. These are the things that are going to be in your project dashboards. You need to assess then whether you have confidence in the project team. So it's your job to make sure and be hyper aware that they are capable and doing the tasks that you've set out for them in your processes. And you also need to be very aware of the big issues on each project. Those are the times where you really dive into the detail and you solve the problems because those are the big problems that require your attention. And what this means is you're not really going to be splitting your attention equally across all 5 projects and automatically doing 1 day per week, because one project might not really have any other work, but another project might be going bad and there's a big issue you have to solve. So that's where your attention is going to be drawn into. For example, I was working on a major solar farm. There was a massive issue with the procurement of the inverters and delays from the supplier. That is the thing that all the senior management got dragged into because that was the big issue that could derail the project, which is where their time, attention, and expertise were required. So you don't have to think about yourself as splitting your time evenly across all your projects. You're diving into one project when big issues come up. So the other part of this is actually whether you have confidence in your team to do the work, whether they need more support or training, or whether they have things that are over control. And your 2 layers for doing this is obviously your actual project dashboard and looking at the performance of the project and understanding whether things are actually on track or not. The second layer of this is, I think, an effective strategy is to really dive very deeply into the specifics. So dive into your budgets, look at a specific issue such as the preliminary costs. How are the preliminary costs been forecast? How are you forecasting this out? How are you forecasting your schedule? And basically doing like a 5 whys exercise and diving in deeper and deeper. And if your team's answering confidently, then you can be sure they're doing it properly. This is a really good check to make sure that people aren't just kind of fluffing their ways and trying to sort of hide things from you. So always never be afraid to really dive into the detail and understand exactly why something is the way it is. So those are two really good strategies you can use. The overall project order, looking at the overall project dashboard, and then being willing to dive really into the detail of exactly how something's been calculated, how someone has come up with it, how have they come up with this duration of construction works, what is driving it, where is the build up of it, can you be confident in it? Those are, I guess, the two strategies you can use. And if you've got a lot of confidence in a team, then you can back off them. But if you're finding that people aren't keeping up, they're not following the processes, they're not keeping on top of things, then that is when you have to put more of your attention into getting them on track. Then the third step to this overall process is the actual portfolio and program management. So again, this is looking at how your entire picture of multiple projects running together, because all these projects will have different start and finish dates. They'll have different cash flow requirements. Your job is basically then to look at all these projects together, what their cash flow requirements are, what their resources requirement, and your job is to pull everything together. So say, for example, you're a self-performed contracting business, you know the earthwork starts on this project on this date and finishes on this date. Then we've got a lull. Then the excavator is going to go to the other project. So this is you sitting on top of the projects and allocating resources appropriately for them. Or for example, you know you've got two big projects starting at once. Your job is to make sure that you have sufficient resources to deal with both of them. Or you might have a massive gap between two projects and be willing to more aggressively tender and bid another project so you can secure a project and you can smooth out your resources. So really, this comes from understanding everything together, probably looking more specifically at the resources and the resource requirements for each project, and then how to basically pull it all together. And the way you do this is with program reporting, where you're pulling together all of the different projects, looking at the starts and finish dates of all these projects and pulling and collecting all the information together to get a program level cash flow, program level starts and finish dates, and basically understanding how, as a business, all your resources and cash is going to be split across these different commitments.